and it's like 5 minutes until we have to break for lunch, and we finally get to your close up. I need that close up. I need that performance in 5 minutes. Otherwise, it's going to cost me thousands of dollars to go into another half hour of overtime. So how are you, if you don't have the confidence, I don't know that I can trust you in that 5 minutes. So I think it's critical, but as you said, it really starts with, why am I pursuing this?
Have you ever thought of what it would be like to pivot in your career? Well, today we are talking to the one and only Kevin Hooks, who is an actor, director, and photographer. He has had success as an actor, much accolades as a director, and now he's having the time of his life as a photographer. If this is your first time here, I am Lydia Nicole, and this is Acting Smarter Now. So, my first question for you is, how did your acting inform you as a director?
Well, that's a very good question, because it was an evolution. It was a process. And I think that when I first started directing, obviously I did not know very much about working with actors. So but I did understand that the instincts were similar. What I was looking for from a performance from an actor in a role were pretty much the same kinds of instincts or techniques that I had used myself as an actor. What I didn't know how to do was to communicate that. And so that was my biggest sort of hurdle in the beginning. I was lucky enough to work with some really solid, talented actors when I started directing. And the first thing I did was a series called St. Elsewhere, which was a medical drama, sort of like the beginning of the ERs of the world. But it was a tremendous cast, great writing. And, I learned an awful lot about working with actors, because I always thought that a director pretty much got what they wanted to get. It's like, well, here's what I'm looking for. Stand on that line, on that mark, say this line. And, that's okay, sir, that's what we'll do. And when I first started, that's what I expected from actors. And I'll never forget, I was working on St. Elsewhere, the first episode, and I had blocked out this very easy scene. I had really over prepared it, to be honest with you. And I remember going to one of the actors, and I said, okay, well, when this gentleman knocks on the door to your office, I want you to get up from your desk and go over to the door and greet him. And he looked at me and he said, why? And I literally was kind of thrown off. I didn't anticipate that at all. And yeah, my answer was kind of like, well, that's what, and I told him, I said, well, this is what I've mapped out, and the rest of the scene takes place in the doorway. And so if you don't get up to do that, he says, there's no way I would get up and greet this guy. I don't know him. He's just some guy knocking on my door. And so I would not get up to greet him. In fact, I don't want to greet him. I'm busy. So that was sort of the first indication that I had that this was a collaborative process with actors, and that there was a give and take to be had. And so I think that was the first thing that really kind of, it scared me in a way, because I didn't anticipate that. And so, but I knew that I had to have reasons and motivations that were more than just, I'm the director and this is what I want you to do. Luckily, I was an actor and I did have those instincts. So what I did was I started to prep, and anything that I asked an actor to do from that moment on, I had to justify it in my own mind as if I was playing the role. And so it got easier, but in the beginning, I think that was the biggest education for me.
You are part of the MTM alumni of actors who became directors at a time when that wasn't really happening, where MTM, Mary Tyler Moore, Grant Tinker really nurtured Black and brown talent in front of the camera, behind the camera. I mean, they really gave so many of us our SAG cards. I
Right.
got my SAG card from MTM. And so,
Wow.
so many actors that I knew at that time that couldn't get a break, MTM gave them a job.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you were on the White Shadow acting. What happened that you decided, I think I want to try my hand at directing?
It's interesting. That's a really really good question because it didn't come from me. The impetus for that didn't come from me at all. I remember the night like it was yesterday. We were in like I think it must have been like our third episode in the first season, and it was a night shoot on the MTM lot, or I call it the MTM lot. It's really the Radford lot, but at that time, every show on the lot was MTM, so we just called it that. But at any rate, we were shooting, and we were on the set. They were lighting, and Bruce Paltrow, who was the creator and executive producer showrunner, saddled up next to me, and he said, "What are you going to do when the show is over?" And keep in mind, this was the third episode of the first season. So I thought, well, what are you talking about? Are we being canceled? Are we not going to finish? I'm thinking about, I got bills to pay. We can't get canceled. And so he said, no, he said, but I have a lot of friends of mine. His wife, Blythe Danner, was a brilliant, brilliant actress. And so he knew the acting community really well. And a lot of them were, people of color. And he said to me, I know how difficult it is for people of color to maintain and sustain a career. And he said, so I was just sort of thinking, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were. And I said, well, to be honest with you, I haven't really thought about it. And he says, well, if you ever want to expand on, what you're doing, or if you have any interest in writing or directing, he said, please know that the resources, all of our resources are open to you. So if you want to come into the editing room, or you want to come to a casting session or a production meeting, anything you'd like to do, I'd be willing to help you out. And, I was blown away by that. Number one. Secondly, I didn't believe him. I thought, it's Friday night. We're out here shooting at night. He probably went across the street to the Italian restaurant and had a couple glasses of wine, and now he's, you know. And I remember sleeping on it that weekend, and I thought, you know what? If he's serious about this, the only way that you're going to find out is to hold him to it. And so I went in that next week and I said, yeah, I'd be very interested. Directing is something that, I'd be interested in doing. And he had, in fact, given that same opportunity to Thomas Carter. And so Thomas, I saw, was in the process. And I thought, well, you know what? I no gain if you don't try, right? And so I did, and he lived up to his end of the bargain. In the, I think it was one of the last episodes of the first season, he said, we're going to give you a shot. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I never got to do White Shadow, but I was scheduled to do it, and we got canceled in the third season. And so it was the first season of Saint Elsewhere that I finally did get an opportunity. But he lived up to his word nonetheless. And it changed my life. It was something that I had no idea that it was coming my way. But, when he brought it up, I thought, okay, let's pursue this and see where it goes. And it wound up changing my life and my career.
I remember when you were shadowing to direct, that you had this big ass book that
Yeah.
you would take with you. And it was I remember it being a very exciting time. First of all, it was an exciting time in Los Angeles because there were so many opportunities going back to MTM. God bless Bruce Paltrow. God bless Stephen Bochco, because
Right.
they really created a um, I don't want to say a community, even though it was a community, but they created an empire which embraced the Black and brown community of creatives. Not just, I remember George Sanford Brown got to direct.
Yeah.
There were just so many people that were being able to be given opportunities. And it was just an exciting time. And if you got to work on the lot at MTM, it was magical. Unlike any other, I mean, the other lots were great, but this was like our lot.
You're right, Lydia. It was family, is what it was. And to your point, one of the exciting things that happened once I did commit to that process of researching and going to meetings and casting sessions and editing rooms and so on and so forth, I was able to go to editing rooms on some of the other shows that were being done on the lot. One of which was Hill Street Blues, and I would go into the editing room. So not only did I get a chance to see what was happening on White Shadow, but I could go down the hall to Hill Street Blues editing rooms, and I could watch them edit that show, which was an entirely different style than what the White Shadow was. And so it really was a family kind of situation. And, that's rare. I mean, you don't see that today. I mean, they're conglomerates now,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine that kind of thing exists on that intimate level very much anymore.
One other thing about MTM, Stephen Bochco would take his crew over to McDonald's in the mornings. So if you wanted to see Stephen or any of the writers, you just got to
Just go to
McDonald's
McDonald's.
early in the morning, like about 9 o'clock. Hey, Stephen, how are
Right,
you? Oh,
right.
which was the best. I thought that was the best. That's my little thing, but it was great. As you were preparing, you started to talk about casting. You got to go into
Mhm.
the casting. What did you start to learn in casting as a director in training that you really didn't know as an actor?
Well, I think that what really enlightened me about those experiences were the nuances that different actors sort of bring to or can bring to a performance. And that was something that, you only experience that with people that you're working with generally. And you say, oh, wow, I didn't anticipate when I read the script that this person would look like that, or that they would behave like that, or I didn't anticipate their cadences or whatever. But up to that point, that was the only way that I had ever evaluated a performance. I had seen other directors do it; they had done it with me, but I didn't understand it. I didn't really pay attention to it because when you're working as an actor on a project, your responsibility is to bring that character that you're playing to life, not concern yourself with everybody else. So that had been the MO up to that point. And I think that, when I first started going to casting sessions and listening to writers talk about the things that they saw or didn't see from performances in auditions, that's when I started to realize that there are a lot of subtle nuances that exist in performance. And, some of it is innate, some of it is just who we are, and some of it is studied. And it just depends on the actor who sort of gets that best. And it fascinated me because it started to inform how I was going to deal with actors when I was directing not only the script that we were casting at that moment, but beyond. So I think that it really did sort of change how I thought about work as an actor and what actors bring to a role that is not written. And that was the fascinating thing. It's like we're looking for something that's written, but at the same time, somebody would come in and deliver something that was well beyond anything that we had thought about. So it was not only what was on the page, but it was something beyond that. And that's when everybody looks at each other and goes, yeah, that's the person. And you, as an actor, you don't know. You go in, you do the best that you can. But yeah, I was just fascinated and surprised by how much forethought and how much really sort of went into making those choices about who would be cast and who wouldn't.
You talked about Thomas Carter being the first one of your group who started directing.
Yeah.
Did he give you any notes when you were starting that you still use today?
It's boy, it was so long ago. I wish I could recall specific words that but Thomas was at that point, he basically led by example. He was so detailed and so prepared, and he took it so seriously. There was really, I mean, he would probably tell you that there was a period where he was learning and really kind of honing his craft, but he was so serious about it and so talented, which was evident immediately. His career just took off like, a firecracker. And so I really, was able to not only see what his process was as a director on set, and he started with the White Shadows, so we also made sure that we kind of harassed him as much as possible too. That was just who we were.
Now, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Since he was the first one in your group who was promoted, sort of, did he uh, direct you guys and himself, or was he out of that particular episode?
I think, if I recall, Thomas did 2 or 3 episodes in the second season, I believe. And I'm pretty sure he was in them as well. I'm sure they wrote him out to some degree, but the story being what it was and us being a team, he couldn't have been out of it for very long. So he probably had limited acting responsibilities during the episodes he directed. But we were all blown away by his confidence, his comfort level with it. He was just a natural born director. He was a natural born leader. And, which was also part of the character he played on the show. He was sort of like the captain of our team. He was the one who, while we were all clowning around and not focused as characters, not as actors, he was the one who, brought a sense of maturity to the group. So that translated to his directing, and we all had a tremendous amount of respect for him immediately, because he just knew what he was doing and he knew what he wanted, and he was able to work with us to get that. And so, as you well know, when you have a director that listens to you, that is has a very good collaborative spirit, and most of all has a vision of their own that you can get behind, you feel confident and you're like, I'll do anything for you. And that's what it was with Thomas. And I think more than anything, I took those values with me when I started directing, and I knew that I had to apply myself in those ways in order for me to have any success in it. And so I think I tried to emulate what he was doing more than anything. But yeah, there were exchanges before my first episode about what can I expect from certain actors who he had directed already, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was remarkable to see him get started and have that kind of success as quickly as he did.
So let me ask you, as you started getting into directing and you started doing a lot of episodics, and you did TV movies, they don't call them TV, or after school specials. And I don't think as actors, we really take into consideration how TV directors are just like actors. They're in
Mm.
for a episode, but they're not there the whole time. So they're coming into something that has already been created. Everybody's already comfortable. And you, the director, have to figure out how you're going to navigate, because you're the guest.
Right.
You're not part of it. Coming from White Shadow, having been from White Shadow, and then you did He's the Mayor. Um, did Was that something that you really understood as you were directing guest episodes? Did you understand that, or not quite?
I think yes, because I don't think that there's any way that you can miss that, because you're walking into a situation with, in large part, with a group of strangers, creative as they may be, with their own expectations and their own ideas, which at that point have had some measure of success. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on the air. So you knew that you had to live up to what they considered to be their best. You certainly didn't want to go in and drop the ball. And so there was a lot of attention paid to that. And how I personally would deal with that is, I would watch as many episodes as I possibly could. And as time went on, I realized I didn't want to see all the episodes. I wanted to see the best episodes. And I would watch those episodes over and over again, and I'd see what worked, what didn't work. If I was confused about certain things, I would be honest about it and say, I understand you guys are looking for this, but I don't see that in this script or in this scene or whatever the situation may be. But yes, there was a lot of pressure to deliver an episode that was consistent with what they consider to be their sort of benchmark, which could have been the pilot. Most of the time, it's the pilot or the first episode that sells the series. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes, they have a bit of a slow start and they're looking for that one episode that clicks. And it may be episode 5 or 6 before they finally get everything to come together. If you're lucky as a guest director, you do that. And if you do that for them, then you're sitting in a cat seat, because they'll want you back. And, that gives you an opportunity to express yourself and feel more comfortable to sort of try different things that may be a little bit outside of what they normally are looking for. And hopefully they trust you enough at that point that, let's see that. Cover me in case that idea you have, Kevin, doesn't work. Let's make sure we have certain coverage. But yes, if you'd like to try this out of focus, weird kind of shot, do it and we'll see if it works. So you kind of have to earn that respect and that trust. But yeah, there's a tremendous amount of pressure. And I was aware of that right from, I can't say I was aware of it right from the beginning, because again, as we talked about, St. Elsewhere, White Shadow, that was our family. So, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. But once I left there and was hired to do something outside of MTM, it became clear that there was a lot more responsibility and creatively and otherwise to sort of make sure that you did not drop the ball and you delivered a good episode.
This is, I think, a little bit more business focused, but you
Mm-hmm.
got to direct on MTM. When did you get a directing agent?
If I recall, it was soon after. I think it may have been maybe 2 or 3 episodes. I did 4 episodes of St. Elsewhere. After the first 2, I think I then started to get calls. So I would say it was pretty early on. Once I did the first episode, I did not have an agent. And I think after I got hired to do the second one, it became clear that I probably need to have somebody out there looking for other opportunities. And so I think it was pretty early on. I don't remember exactly when, but I want to say it was early.
I got to see a bunch of the episodes that you've done over the
Hmm.
years.
I'm
And
sorry about that because I had to put you through
let
that.
me just say,
Yeah.
something. First of all, Bones was one of my favorite shows at the time. And when you directed a few of the episodes, you brought a humanity to that show. And I loved Bones. I'm just putting it out there. I really enjoyed Bones. I just enjoyed the tomfoolery of it all. But the episodes that you did in that show, you
Hmm.
brought a certain humanity that was not in the show.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I
That's
noticed
interesting.
that on other episodics, while it was a procedural, it was still kind of Dick Wolf's show
Yeah.
is a real procedural. It's just
Right.
cut and dry. But then
It's
there are
pure. It's
certain,
pure procedure. Yeah.
yeah,
It
there's
has
certain
been historically.
procedurals that
Yeah.
still have a family, still have a bit where you love these characters. They're warm
Yeah.
and fuzzy. And I noticed that you would bring the humanity.
Hmm.
Saying that, the first movie that I saw you do with Halle Berry and
Oh yeah.
with Tommy Davidson,
Tommy
Strictly Business,
Davidson. Yeah.
there was not just a lot of humanity, but it was a fun movie. It was fun. It was delicious. It was just
Yeah.
a fun,
I like
delicious
that.
movie. And so, um, what because again, I want to look at this from an actor's point of view, becoming a
Yeah.
director, working with actors, because I think
Right.
that's not all directors are actors turned directors. And so
Right.
when we get a chance to work with a director who was an actor, I think it brings a whole different camaraderie that
Yes.
you don't get from a technical director. That's why I'm kind of chiseling
Yeah,
at
I
this.
think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right, and that I immediately kind of knew. We touched upon it in the earlier question, but I immediately kind of that resonated with me because I found it easy after that initial like why question. I began answering the why for myself. And so what happened is that it made it easier for me to communicate with actors because I understood the process that most, not all, actors bring to their work. And so I was able to, first of all, that was something that I always tried to find in any character was humanity. I just think that is probably the most tangible trait in any human being that you watch.
Well, if you go back to your, I don't know if it was your first performance, JT, that
Yeah,
that character was humanity walking. I mean, that character was humanity walking. As a little kid, for you to have that sensitivity, I remember seeing that as a little kid crying. You know, I cried. I
I
like,
made you cry. I'm so sorry.
the kitty,
Yeah, it was the
and
cat that made you cry,
no,
not
no,
me.
you did. You did running, running from the boys. We're going to beat you up.
Right,
That,
right.
that in your work as an actor, you've always brought humanity.
Yeah,
I mean, not every actor does that. Every actor has their own little special sauce that they bring, but part of your
yeah,
special sauce is humanity, and to see you carry that into your directing, I think is outstanding in that it's just who you are. It's just
yeah,
what you do. There is a joy and a light that you bring to your work. So it shows up in Strictly Business, and I'm going somewhere with this. So when you were first starting to prep to do
yeah.
this film, which is so different from episodic, because now you're in charge, right? This
Right.
is this is you will either sink or swim. There, you can't blame it on anybody else.
No,
Well, you know,
you're out there.
that crew
Yeah.
didn't like me, but now I'm going on to the next.
Right.
This is your
Right.
baby. This is
Yeah.
what, first of all, what made you want to do this particular movie?
It's funny. This brings up a very good point, which I will talk about briefly, and then I will answer your question. But the presumption is that we in films and in features that we get a chance to pick what we do. And that was a situation that popped up literally within a 72-hour period where the director who was actually directing the movie, they had started shooting. And I got a phone call on Friday or early Saturday morning from my agent who said, I'm going to send you a script. You've got to read it right now when you get it and tell me if you're interested in it, because if you are, they're going to fly you to New York to meet. And he said, they've already started, but they're thinking about making a change. So this was something that it wasn't on my radar at all. And all of that wound up happening. I read it. And I thought, this could be my first feature. There were some people in it that I knew. And I thought, it's New York. The energy in New York is always great. What better place to sort of make your feature film debut than in a city that you love? And, so I wound up doing it. But it wasn't something that was on my radar, is my point. It was, it was circumstance, fate, call it what you want, but it was something that right place, right time. In terms of the humanity thing, I think that you're absolutely right. Creatively, I think that who we are is always a part of our work. And I think that honesty, it keeps us honest, is what I'm really trying to say. And so that's something that I always felt like I needed to tap into with any creator that I was dealing with, whether it was a writer, another director, an actor, but we're talking specifically about actors. That was part of the dialogue. It was like, how do we find the humanity in this moment? How do we keep this moment grounded in a scene which is not particularly well written, with a character that is somewhat over the top or somewhat exaggerated or not written in that way? How do we ground this character in some humanity so that people can connect? And I think that never went away. That was something that I always wanted to communicate with actors. I wanted them to communicate that with me, because I think that all actors really strive, regardless of what role they're playing. They want to make sure that character is somehow accessible. And you hear that with people who play villains a lot. Really great actors who play bad people. And, and that's what they talk about. They're like, I just tried to find the human being, the person, the struggles, those real things that exist in all of us, and bring it to this character. And when they're successful doing that, it really does sort of connect, I think, with people's souls and their hearts and their minds. And that was something that I just always wanted to try to find, because I think that is sort of like that. It's at the core of solid performance. It's that thing that that rock that you've got in your hand always, that it's tangible. You can tap into that, and people see it. They respond to it. And so, yeah, that was always a part. That was always in the toolbox, and I think it was less a tool than an instinct.
Mm, mm. Okay, you hit upon something that I think all actors can relate to, and that is when you get a bad script and you got to make it work.
Yes.
And as a director, I'm sure you've also had that, where the writing just didn't, it was
Yeah.
bad, and now
It
you
yeah.
gotta
It didn't. Yes.
figure it out.
It was challenging. Yes.
I like that word.
Yeah.
It was challenging and you have to figure it out. So,
Yeah.
for actors out there, because not all actors get an opportunity to get a great piece of material. Most of the
Right.
time, you get, 4 lines, 3 lines of something that doesn't even make sense, and you gotta bring it in
Yeah.
some way. What would your advice be, coming from being an actor, now a director, that you could say to them if you were going to direct them and say, I know this is a piece of crap, but I need you to take this challenging piece of material
Yeah.
and do
Yeah.
something.
What I would say is to spend a significant amount of time filling in the blanks. One of the things that happens particularly in television, where characters are drawn, basically we've got a 42-minute window, and that pretty much it's a very short time to establish characters, and that's why casting is so critical. But I think that what's even more critical for actors is backstory. I always believe that if you understand the character's backstory, that one scene, those 4 lines that you have, you understand how that character got to that point to say those 4 lines, and that can inform an awful lot. And I think sometimes, when actors are first starting out, they get cast and it's only 4 lines. Maybe it's not even that. And they sort of come into it again as a stranger. You show up on set and there's all these people and you got one shot. You got a scene with the 2 leads, people you've been watching your entire life. And now suddenly you're in a scene with them and you've got these 2 lines. And I think that can overwhelm an actor, because that becomes their reality for that moment. They're overwhelmed by where I am. And so I would always ask actors, how do you think this character got to this moment? What happened in his or her life, to get you here? What happened this morning when this character woke up and then all of a sudden these things happen and here you are with these 2 people? Think about that. What did you have for breakfast? What did you do after breakfast? Did you work out? Did you take a walk? Did you make phone calls? What did you do? Fill in those blanks, because when you come, that's called preparation. And when you come with that, I have to tell you that as a director, when an actor comes in with those 2 lines and that actor says to me, I've been given some thought as to how I can do this, and I want to know what you want, but I also had some thoughts and ideas. And you're like, okay, great. Let's talk about that. And, sometimes, it may not be something that you want to use, but you'd be surprised how just having that dialogue and asking questions and having thought through some of these moments that are off camera can really inform those 2 lines in that specific moment. And so I think it's really important. Fill in the blanks, do your homework, create a backstory. Especially now, there are writers there's usually a writer on the set. Generally because they don't trust what the directors are going to do. But but it is a good thing in the sense that you don't have to play a guessing game. You don't, it's like, hey, what are you looking for? What is this person about? And you've got the writer right there, if not the director. But I think that's the key. That's something that I would sort of recommend and highly sort of recommend for actors to do. Bring something with you. Bring your tool bag. Bring that information, that foundation with you that you at least have to work from. Because the other thing is, Lydia, as you said earlier, not all directors or actors they're not going to engage you. You may wind up with a director who doesn't even say action and cut. He just sits, he or she, I keep saying he, I mean he or she sits in a chair and tells the assistant director, oh, please tell her to do such and such a thing. So you never know what you're going to get. So if you don't do that homework yourself, you may be lost. And that would be a tragedy for an actor who's just starting out and trying to get some momentum in their career.
I want to go back to the auditioning. As a director, when you come into the audition process, now it's self tapes. What did you look for when you were watching those self tapes? And not necessarily in the lines,
Yeah.
but what were you looking for in the actor? You know, when you're going through all those videos, and hopefully they have narrowed them down for you because the casting director saw a million of
Right.
them, so you only got 100 of them. What were you looking for? What was speaking to you?
I think that it was the same thing that I was looking for when actors actually came into the room. There's a self confidence and preparedness. I think are the two things that I would look for, and I think one comes with the other. I should have reversed it. Preparedness, self confidence go hand in hand. Professionalism. One of the things that I think that I always looked for was variety. I don't know much about self tapes because I never really liked that idea. I mean, I didn't give me as a director, a chance to work with the actor. I think it's a big disadvantage to everybody other than showrunners who want to be a part of the casting process but don't have time, so they just go home and they watch it at night or in the morning or whatever. It helps them, but I don't think it helps the process at all. But I mean, I think it was the same things, Lydia. Like I said, coming in with a uh, a motivation and executing that motivation, meaning to basically come up with a process of how this scene works for this character, executing that, and also having the confidence to do that, but also having the confidence to say, okay, there's another way to go with this, which I'd also like to explore. So I'm going to do another take and I'm going to do it with this other value. And then that way they see, oh, he's versatile. He can do other things. So I think that there was that. It's tough to watch a tape when you can tell that someone is nervous, which you get, and so I think you've got to sort of work that out, because that then you start to think, okay, well, is this person got enough confidence to, if they're not able to do it there, how do I trust that I can bring them on a set with 150 people watching and have them deliver? So I think that again, that self-confidence, which comes with being prepared, which comes with giving yourself a backstory, comes with thinking outside the box sometimes, give them what you think, they want. But if there's another idea there that's not radical and crazy, yeah, show them both, show your versatility. If it's off base, they'll say, yeah, that's a little off base, but this other thing they did is really good. So
Mm.
I think those are probably the things that I would look for.
You have shot in America, you have shot in Canada, and you have shot in South Africa. Am I missing anywhere else that you've shot?
Yeah, Eastern Europe,
Oh, okay.
and France, and yeah, all over the world, let's say.
Okay.
Australia.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that. So in shooting in these different places, is it, have you found it to be the same, or does every
Oh,
place bring a different set of circumstances, a different challenge, other than
yes.
uh, um, language, because we're talking Australia, we're talking uh,
Yeah.
South Africa, where the dialect is different, the accent is different. Sometimes it's like what you say. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
what was some of the challenges for you that you had to deal with as a director?
Well, like you said, language was the first one. I mean, and when I was in Eastern Europe, for instance, there was a lot of language that, they didn't speak English, a lot of them. So, I had to have an interpreter, sort of interpret for me there. But, I think culturally it was different. Everybody across the world has their own process of making, films and television. And that was the key thing. It's done differently. The logistics are different. The expectations are different. The the hours are different. We work off of basically a 12-hour day. In some places, it was a 10-hour day. I remember when I was in France, we were doing a thing in Paris, and it was winter, so it probably was more daylight than anything. But those were 10-hour days. If I recall, Australia was the same way. It was just straight up 10 hours, which was wonderful. But that was a challenge because your thinking is 12 hours. And if I need an extra hour, maybe I banked it and I can, do a 13-hour day. But, when you've made a deal with the crew that they're only going to work 10 hours, that's it. You walk away. So, there were challenges like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when cameras get rolling and actors start doing their things and the actual filmmaking process starts, it's the same.
Okay.
It's the same. What you see happening in front of you and behind the camera is pretty much the same. I think it was all the logistics and the language that was the big thing. But it's also, it was invigorating to go somewhere and have them say, oh, this is how we do it here. And be able to sort of adapt to that, and you almost don't have a choice, because in order to execute at the highest level, you have to understand that these are the folks that are going to make this happen. I'm a small part of it, but these other 149 people, they're the ones that are going to make it happen. And so, again, it's about building trust, and whether there's a language barrier or a logistics barrier, whatever it is, you have to get beyond it. I would say that the scariest moment for me was in Australia when they gave me a car to drive back and forth to the studio. And I realized that they drive on the opposite side of the road and the steering wheel's on the opposite side of the car. Now, that was the scariest thing ever about working in other countries. That was pretty scary. And in fact, I didn't do it for like 3 weeks. The first 3 weeks, I was like, nope, not going to happen. So finally, they said to me, listen, we're paying this person a lot of money. You have a car. You got to get in the car and drive to work. So I did.
I
But,
feel you. I feel you. I
yeah,
would have said no too.
it was not pretty.
That's funny. Other than Madiba, was there any other project that you did that was biographical, that was based on a real person
Oh,
that was
yeah.
still alive?
That was still alive. Hmm. I want to say yes, but I can't remember exactly what it was. Before you said still alive, it was easy because I did it. I did a series called Genius, which Ron Howard produced, and I did 2 seasons of that. That's when I was in Eastern Europe. We were in Prague the first year, and we did Albert Einstein that year, and then the next year we did Picasso. And so those are always a lot of fun. They're a lot of work though, because, there's just so much research. I had not been a Picasso fan generally in my life because I really didn't understand what it was. I just, I looked at cubism and I went, really? I don't know. But, the research that goes into that, you learn so much about the person or the people. And as we did with Madiba. But I'm trying to think if there was someone that was still alive. I don't know that I ever did a biography of someone that was still alive. I could be wrong, but I don't remember that.
Okay. I want to talk about Madiba because
Okay.
that was a mini series. That
Yeah.
was pretty epic. How did you get connected with that project?
Yeah, that was another one that sort of popped up. I got a phone call from my new agent at that time. I had been with him less than a month, and the whole point was that I wanted to try to change the focus of what I had been doing, which was a lot of network episodic television, and at the time, streaming had blown up and I wanted a piece of that. I wanted to sort of shift gears and go into that. So I wound up leaving my agent at the time, and I signed with a good buddy of mine, Bill Douglas, over at Paradigm, and so within a month, he says, "I've got something that I think you might be interested in," and he mentioned that this South African company was doing a 6-hour miniseries on the life of Nelson Mandela. And I was like, well, yeah, obviously I'm very interested in that. So they sent me the script and I read the first 2 hours, I think it was, maybe the first three. And I really liked it. And I thought, what an incredible opportunity. And I couldn't pass it up. And so I said, absolutely. And we met, I think we did a Zoom call. It might have been during that time where they first kind of, I don't think it was called Zoom back then, though. It
The
was it
Skype.
was something
It was
else.
Skype,
But
probably.
Skype, yes, there
Yes,
you go.
yes, yes.
And so we had a great meeting, and they said we'd love for you to do it. And I wound up going down there for 6 months and got to know a lot of people and really spent time. What was very interesting about that piece is that I had never. It was revelatory because I got to South Africa, and I'm in a restaurant having dinner, and the waiter comes by and we're chatting it up, and he says, so what are you doing here? Because quite naturally, obviously, I'm not South African, and I say, oh, we're working on this thing in Nelson Mandela, and he's got a story about when he met Nelson Mandela, or when Nelson Mandela came to his school, or whatever the situation was. Every person that I met in South Africa had a perspective of Nelson Mandela. And so it was just mind blowing that, okay, I'm in the place that he grew up, that he lived and worked, and everybody that I meet is a witness to it, it was impacted by it. And that was amazing because when you're doing your homework and you can just literally go downstairs in the lobby of the hotel and sit there and talk to people about their experience of what you're about to embark upon, it was really enlightening and a once in a lifetime experience. I really enjoyed it. It was the hardest thing I ever did. To direct all 6 hours, which seems to be somewhat commonplace now. But I had never done that. But, I figured, what am I going to do? Like walk away from it? No, let's go. Let's do it. So we did. And I got a chance to do it with my dear friend Lawrence Fishburne on top of that, which was amazing.
What shifted you during that period? You talked about meeting all these people, but what shifted you? How did it impact you? Because it's kind of like being with the Pope, or being, you're with Barack Obama. You're with someone who is a larger than life figure, and you are in their space, their energy. That you still feel their essence.
Unfortunately, Madiba, as he was affectionately known, was gone by that time. But I did spend a lot of time with Kwaku Mandela, who is one of his grandsons. He was a producer on it, so we spent a lot of time together. I actually spent time with his family. I spent time at his home, and got to know, the people that were close to him. I interviewed a number of people. In fact, one or two people that were in prison with him for that period of time, that 27-year period of time. And so it was life changing. What shifted in me, I think, was, first of all, was a bucket list. Want to go to South Africa, would love to go to Robben Island and see, where it was that this remarkable man spent 27 years of his life imprisoned, away from his family, away from his people, only to be released and to ascend to the presidency of a nation that had been so discriminated against for years and years. I felt a part of it. I remember when I got there, one of the drivers said to me at one point, like on day 3 or 4, it was early on, and he said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I kind of feel like I'm home. I kind of feel like I belong here. I've never experienced this before, And he said, "That's because you are home." And I was treated that way. It was just such a wonderful, wonderful experience to have all these fantastic people of color, these Black people, doing all of these different things. Kids going to school in uniforms, all of them. There are no schools where you don't go in a uniform. I mean, and these doctors and lawyers and just professional people, and engagement in how they want to change the world and how they want to change their nation. And it was significant. And I'll never forget it. It was just, it was larger than the 6-hour miniseries. It was life changing. And so the experience itself was just overwhelming, and I'll never forget it.
Your passion is photography. Did you take pictures there? Were you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I took a big suitcase full of equipment. And the first thing I did when I got there is I took it to the camera guys, and I said, "This is my camera stuff. Keep it on the truck. And, every morning when we get here, I'm going to tell you, put a certain lens on it and you bring it over." And, so absolutely, I shot a lot of stuff there. I mean, as much as I could, and still direct. I mean, it was kind of hard. But yeah, it is my passion, and it has been since I was a young kid. I mean, I got my first Polaroid camera on the set of Sounder when I was 13 years old, and I've been taking pictures ever since. And,
so let's talk about cameras and shooting, because for anyone who is on Instagram, you need to go to Hook Shots. So you could see some of Kevin's amazing work. Every time I see the photo that you put up, I'm like, oh my God, your work with black and white is just amazing.
Thank you.
And that's one thing I did not know, that you had a passion for photography, because I've always loved photography. I love the fact that you started with a Polaroid. And when did you graduate from Polaroid to a film camera?
I think it was soon after. We did Sounder, and then I started the following fall. We shot that during the summer. I believe it was 1970 or 71. And I immediately started at a new school private school in Philadelphia when I got back home. And as it happened, they had a photography class. This was in the 8th grade, dark room, the whole thing. So I had to have a real camera at that point. So I remember, I don't know where it came from. It was probably used, but I had a Yashica, whatever, I don't know. And, I could only shoot black and white film at that time because it was cheaper than color. So that was pretty much what I shot was, Tri-X and, that kind of thing. And would develop my own stuff. So I've always been fond of black and white. And so as time went on, and this really kind of happened after I retired, and that was part of the reason why I did retire, because I felt like I wanted to spend more time pursuing, photography and making it kind
So
of a
let's stop
full-time
for a
thing.
second because you haven't
Yeah.
retired. You've just shifted medium. So let's not
Okay.
even
All right.
because
Okay.
that's some bogus stuff. I retired.
Okay.
No, you didn't.
Well,
No, you
I mean,
didn't.
of
You
course,
just shifted the medium of creativity that you are working with. So go ahead.
okay.
I just
I
had to give
will.
you a pop. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, got it. I will go with that. I will. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. So as I sort of transferred my creative energies, I was shooting color, I was shooting black and white from time to time, and I just found myself always, even if I shot color, I would always wind up. It's like, oh, what does this look like if it's black and white? And I personally prefer black and white, I think, and that's why most of my work is in black and white. And I think part of the reason for it is that there's no distraction with color in a black and white photograph. That's number one. Number two, I am fascinated by light and shadow. It just, my eye goes to it immediately. I seek it out. And so black and white gives me a really wonderful opportunity to simplify what I intend for the eye to see. And so I really enjoy it. And, I try to push myself in different directions and play with different things. And it's an evolution. But ultimately, it's light and shadow and black and white.
I heard you talking about learning to see light. And I
Yes.
find that fascinating because I've never heard that term before with photography. So when you say learn to see the light, what is it that what are we looking for if we're playing with cameras?
It's funny. I didn't come up with that. That was something that I met another photographer a few years ago, maybe a dozen years ago now, and he shot in black and white. And I asked him, I said, what do you think the key to this is? What do you focus on? What do you think the key to sort of consistently making interesting work is in black and white? And he said, you have to learn to see light. And I just kind of laughed. And I just went, well, duh. Yeah. But what I took that to mean, and what I've learned from that, is that, again, it's about the balance of light. And I think we go through life and, we go down a set of stairs into the subway and we know that you kind of feel the sun hit you in one spot, but you don't really pay attention to it. And then you realize you go into shadow. And this happens to us every day, all day. We're going through light and shafts of light, all those kind of things. You open the shutters or you open your blinds and that light gets cut by those blinds and you see the pattern and, that kind of thing. And so you have to just discipline yourself to look for specific things like that. And really what it means is pay attention. It means you really have to be analyzing the light And it's really interesting because I go out with people from time to time, to shoot. People ask me, say, "Oh, can I go out with you? Because I'd love to see your process," and so on and so forth. And that is one of the things that comes up more than you would imagine, is that, when I look at something and I say, "This is what I'm trying to do. You see that shaft of light over there? Well, I'm going to take that shaft of light and I'm going to take the shadow areas of that and I'm going to bring them way down to black. And what you're going to see is just this little triangle of light." And they look at it and they go, "I don't know what you're talking about." And it's just because they haven't really done it enough to be able to look at it and see it in that way. I think I was also very lucky in that I was a director who got to work with some of the best directors of photography in the business for, 40 years. And I learned so much from them about reading light. And, I'm now, with all of that knowledge and experience, I'm challenged with having to take that information and apply it to my own work by myself. There's no DP when I go out in the street. So it's just me. Um, but yeah, learning to see light is a very specific thing, and it's hard to explain. But once you start to see it, you can't unsee it.
I heard you say you had a friend who was using geometry to shoot. And I see that in some of your work, using the angles, using the
Hmm.
shapes. And it didn't hit me that that's what I was seeing until I heard you say that. I said, oh, I can see that he does
Yeah.
that. How has that affected your ability to make pictures? Because you're making pictures in doing that. You're not just
Well,
shooting,
you
you're
use
actually making a picture.
right. You use the exact term, and that is that there's a difference between taking pictures and making pictures. Especially in this day and age with AI. I mean, you can just basically make up, which I don't do, but I'm saying we're now at a point where making pictures has a whole different connotation to it. But no, it becomes more difficult to find because you're absolutely right. I like geometry. I like the idea of a frame within a frame. And I think that's what light and shadow does for me. I'm able to create those angles, and those lines that I think are so important in this concept of a frame within a frame, almost like a window, to a house. So yeah, I think it makes it much more difficult to go out and take pictures. There are days when I go out or make pictures. There are days when I go out and I come back and I haven't found that, it's cloudy today. And so I probably wouldn't go out today because there's no light. But that's what's nice about it too, is that it challenges you to come up with ways to accomplish that are not always dependent upon light and shadow. And maybe it's a reflection, or maybe it's something else that you work on that day. But there's a wide variety of things. I'm trying to, like I said, push myself to really find new things constantly. It's not easy, but it is a joy to explore the process.
Now,
That's for
when you
sure.
were living in LA, you went down to downtown LA and did a lot of your shoots.
Yes.
Why downtown LA as opposed to going to Beverly Hills or going to Culver City? Why downtown LA?
Well, I think that architecture is also a key component to what I try to do. And I was in Chicago in July with another photographer friend of mine, and I love shooting Chicago because the light. What happens in downtown areas is that the light reflects off of windows and between buildings, and it does so many different things that I enjoy. Also, the angles of the buildings create lines in the frame. So the more buildings there are, the more opportunity you have to do that. And also, it's just a density thing too. You know, I mean, downtowns tend to be a little bit more densely populated than some of the other areas. So by the way, I did shoot in Beverly Hills, and I shot in Culver
Oh,
City
okay.
and Long Beach, and a lot of different places. I think I just wound up downtown more just because I felt comfortable there. I go downtown Atlanta, I shoot down there as well, and I just think I love the hustle bustle of it. I like the fact that there's people that are doing their thing and they're not really all that concerned about me taking pictures or making pictures. So it's easier. It's easier to get lost and to to sort of be productive in those areas.
What got you into street photography, as you call it? You started doing photography.
I think I've always done street photography. I just didn't know that's what it was called. And in fact, I don't know that it was called that until, several years ago. I mean, well, that's not true. I mean, there's a long history of street photography. I wasn't aware of it. But I think really it was traveling as much as I did, Lydia, I would be, when I wasn't working, I would, be out with my camera, whether it was Budapest or Prague or Melbourne or, any of these places. Johannesburg, Cape Town is another incredible city to shoot. So I would be out and about taking pictures. So I think quite naturally I felt like, oh, I like being in among the folks and the activity, the density. And because I stayed in areas that were generally within, they were very populated and dense. I think I just quite naturally was drawn to this idea of street photography when I started to really pursue it as a creative outlet. It just seemed like, oh, okay, well then I'll just keep doing that, but I'll ramp it up and try to add to, the ideology or the concepts of it. And so, and that's a little tough because sometimes like I said, I go out and I just don't feel it. It's like, oh, maybe I should go shoot landscape. And I do, I'll switch it up. But
Hmm.
I am definitely more comfortable in urban environments.
What shifted in you to go from having photography as a hobby to then really making, because photography is just as expensive as playing golf. You got to
I think it might be
you,
more
you got
expensive.
to you have to invest in lenses, you got to invest in
Hmm.
cameras, you got to, it is not a poor man's
No.
outlet. So when did it go from I'm just going to use my Polaroid to hey, I want a Leica, because
Yeah.
now you've gone from a low level to the
Yeah.
high. You got to the Rolls Royce of
Yeah.
cameras.
Yeah. Yeah.
When did that start happening in your career? Was it as you were directing that you um, got inspired to go, you know what, I think I'm going to do a little bit more photography now?
Later in my career, I definitely was much more inspired by the visual aspect of filmmaking. And I think part of it, to be absolutely honest with you, had to do with the change in technology from shooting film to, all of a sudden it went digital. Now we were able to, look at a monitor at Video Village and see exactly what the image was going to be. And I think I just became much more aware of what cinematographers were doing and what I mean, I always knew that their contributions were great, but I wasn't seeing what they were seeing. And I think when everything went digital and we were able to see everything as it was happening, I started to appreciate that a lot more. It was very inspirational and invigorating to share ideas with these visual artists who were at the top of their game. And I think I wanted to, um, try to do that myself. I even at one point thought, well, maybe I'll be a DP next. Maybe I'll stay in the business, but I'll move into, shooting films. I don't know that I would want to shoot a film I was directing, but maybe, why not? Steven Soderbergh did it. A number of people did it. So I think that was where things kind of changed. And then, you start to look at the quality of the image, the quality of the lenses. Are you using lenses that are going to allow you to shoot in low light? That kind of thing. And as I got caught up in that, my bank account got caught up in it as well. And I also had a good friend of mine, who I was at the time. He's become a good friend, but he's the general manager over at Leica LA, and I was introduced to him by my daughter. And so we started talking, and he introduced me to some other people who shot the Leica brand. And I just sort of fell in love with the ease of the camera. There's not a lot of buttons and knobs and dials, and it's very simple. And it really, it felt very comfortable to me. And so I went down that rabbit hole, and I'm still paying for it.
So let's talk about uh, low light. When you use,
Yeah,
what lenses do you like to use when you're shooting in low light? Because that is a whole nother that's a whole
yeah,
nother project. When you're doing just low light, you got
yeah,
to have that specific lens. What's your
yeah.
favorite low light
Well,
lens?
I think it's really a matter of the sort of exposure that these lenses are built for. So I think the fastest lens that I own right now is what we would call an f1.4. So that's a pretty wide open lens. I mean, that is a pretty sensitive
And
lens
that's
to
also
low
a
light.
very expensive lens.
Yeah,
That's a
they
the
are,
yeah.
and which is why I don't have a lot of them. So my favorite one is the one that I own that is a low light lens, which is this 50 millimeter Leica 1.4 Sumalux, which only is a name that they give to their level of, of sort of sensitivity to light. So I have a 1.4. They also build one that is a 0.95, which basically you could light a candle and shoot.
Wow.
And so, although I don't do an awful lot of night stuff or low light stuff, that when I do it, it's usually that's my go-to lens. I also have a camera that only shoots black and white. And so
Is
that
that a Leica
is,
as well, or is that a different?
yes,
Wow.
yeah, no, that is a Leica as well. So at this point, I pretty much only shoot Leica. I just enjoy the experience, and their equipment is top notch. The lenses are great. I've actually been to the factory in Wetzlar, Germany. I was there a few years ago, and it was fascinating to watch them build this stuff. It's just incredible. So yes, I'm down the rabbit hole.
What are your two favorite lenses to shoot with when you're going out to do black and white?
Okay, so my two go-to lenses, which are on two different cameras, I like to shoot. I think my eye sees a 35 millimeter lens. That's sort of my go-to lens. I mean, I can look at something without the camera, and I'll know what it will look like in the camera, if that makes sense. And that's a 35 millimeter. It just fits. My eye sees it very easily. The other one is a 28 millimeter. As I said, I like space. I don't like getting super tight on something unless I'm doing a portrait, or something detailed like that. But I generally like to get a sense of space and place. So my go-to lenses are 28 millimeter, which I think is also actually a 1.4, And then my 35 millimeter is a 2. So it's not as good in low light, but during the day, it's just a clean, crisp, really, really well made lens. And so those are the two that I generally use. I also have a 50 millimeter, which I talked about before. And I just got a 90 millimeter about
Ooh.
6 months ago,
And what do you
which
use
I
that
actually haven't
90
shot that
for?
much.
Okay, because
Say it
that's
again.
tight. That's a nice tight.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a lens that I could compress distance a little bit with. I just find sometimes, when I'm out with the 28 or the 35, I'll see something, 50 feet, 60 feet away, and I'll be like, oh, I wish I could get a little bit. So I played around with that. But it's very difficult to keep focus with that lens.
Mm.
I would come home crying because I'd download the stuff and I'd look at it and I'd say, oh, I can't wait to see that shot I did of Lydia when she was, and then I'd get home and Lydia would be out of focus.
Oh
So
man.
it's tough, but that's part of the process.
Yes. The reason why I'm spending time on photography is because I think actors need to have hobbies. They need to have things that
Interesting.
are not acting, but that
Right.
gives them a sense of freedom and passion. And I heard you say what you love most about shooting is that it's singular. It's just
Yes.
you. There is no crew. There is nobody telling you what to do. This is yours. You alone make it. And so
Yes.
it just reminded me of why actors need to have hobbies. They need to have other interests other than acting. Sometimes no matter what creative medium you deal with, sometimes we tend to just, that's all we know. All I know is about acting,
Right.
or all I know is about
Right.
singing or dancing, and we don't open ourselves up to learn different things. And one of the things I learned from you early on was that um, you had such an appetite for many different things. I remember going to see French films with you, and we talked.
Right.
You were the one who introduced me to Itzhak Perlman, and that you really uh, for someone from our group, you really
Right.
were very knowledgeable about other things. I would go see foreign films by myself, but there was
Right.
nobody in my group who I could say, "Hey, you want to go see Last Tango in
Yeah.
Paris?"
Right.
My jam are Korean films. That's my
Right.
thing.
Right. Right.
Korean dramas, forget about it. I'm in it to win it.
You're on it. Right.
But I think that actors need to have different hobbies or different interests that
Right.
it takes them away from the work, because acting is fantastic. I could talk about it all day, but at some point you're not always talking to actors. There are other
Yeah.
people in the
Right.
world, and you need to be able to connect with them. So when I go to the supermarket, I'm always asking whoever's next to me, what do you use that item for? What do you cook? I do. I'm
That's
like, what
funny.
is that, and what do you use it for? How do you make
Right.
it? What ingredients to use? I am always I'm the nosy one. I want to know. Tell me. But
That's
I just
funny.
think that it just makes you a better, well-rounded human being.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, one of the things that I learned it very early on for whatever reason, and I don't know why. I think it was, well, actually, as I'm talking, I think I do know why. Because when I was younger, I was about 19 years old, and, I had just moved to LA when I was like 17 or 18. And, that first year was, as it is for a lot of people, was super tough. And even though I had some background in it, I didn't know if people were going to hire me. I didn't know if I was any good. So the bottom line is that there was a lot of stress that came with that. I mean, I had stomach problems. My hair was falling out. I mean, it was bad. And I just remember going to the doctor, and he was saying to me, he says, you're going to have to learn how to deal with the stress of this business if you're going to be in it, because otherwise it will eat you alive and you will be unhealthy. And, they sent me, this information, pamphlets about stress. And, I talked to people about it and all that. And I eventually learned that in order for me not to stress that business, I needed to have balance in my life. I needed to do other things that gave me something else to think about, something else to do, some other pleasure, some other, outlets creatively or otherwise, that I was able to take my mind off of the stress of what we were all trying to do. And I think ambition, is a very tricky thing. I think it can create a tremendous amount of stress when you're younger. And if you don't know how to deal with that, it will eat you alive. And I think it's something young, old, whatever. I think during the course of your life, there are going to be periods that are tough, and you have to find ways to counteract that stress because it does impact your health. And so for me, there was photography. I was always interested in European films, in foreign films. My father turned me on to those.
When did that love start for you?
Well, when I was a kid, and I used to go, I grew up in Philadelphia, but when my father left to go to New York to pursue his career, I would go to New York to visit and stay with him for weekends and holidays and during the summer, that kind of thing. And we would always go to the movies. So it was really him that there were movies that he wanted to see that I guess he kind of dragged me to because nobody would go with him either. Um, and so I would sit there and I'd watch these films with him, and I was like, wow, this is interesting. So this is from where, and it's like, oh, this is a French film, or this is an Italian film, and then you realize, oh, wow, okay, well, some of the finest filmmakers in the world are actually Italian and French and Japanese. And, so I was fascinated by that. And I think, but there's always been something, there's always been some balance, whether, the usual stuff, there's golf, there's working out, there's, whatever it is, you've got to have that outlet. I think I agree with you 100% that it's very important for you to be able to let that go, even if it's just for a few hours. Just let it go. Move
Absolutely.
on.
You brought up your dad, who is amazing, Robert Hooks, who is just one of our icons, and just contributed so much to Black cinema. My thought is today, when you're a child of someone famous and you are making your way, they put this label, Nepo baby, which I think is so
Right.
disgusting. I find it so offensive. When I hear people, I want to punch them out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you started working at a really young. Was JT your first project, or had you done other
That
stuff
was the
before?
first project that I was the lead in. I had done an episode of my father's show, NYPD. But yeah, that was the biggest thing that I had done at that point was JT. And yeah, that was sort of I was the lead. So that was, the responsibility was huge. I didn't know it. I was just having a good time. But yeah, JT was sort of the first big thing.
So, as a kid working in the industry with your dad being this big figure, did you hear that? Did you hear conversations of people saying, "Oh, that's Robert's kid"? Did you, or had you already carved out your own path by that point? Because you had gotten quite a few credits where, and it wasn't that we can talk about some famous people's children that really don't have talent, that really
Right.
should not,
Right.
they should find their passion. But you had a gift, and it showed itself every time you were on camera. What was it like being the son of someone who already
Mm.
had a big name, of finding your place in the industry?
I think I was fortunate in that I started at such a young age that I didn't even understand the politics of that or the perception of it. I was also so young that I didn't hear it. If it existed, I didn't hear it. I wasn't aware of it. But, it's the difference between like, you know, if I were to try that at 22, then it would be fairly like, oh, yeah, well, he's just here because whatever. But at 9, people are like, oh, that's his kid. Oh, that's so cute. Look at him. He's so, and that's what I heard, more than anything. And, it was only, in a short period of time, I went from, JT, I think in 1969, and then by 1971, here's Sounder. And at that point, I think the performance in Sounder, I think, kind of established me as my own sort of entity, if you will. And so I think it sort of, if it was going to be talked about, I think Sounder kind of erased that. Or at least I wasn't aware of it. But yeah, I never really got that. And so I can't really speak to it as much, to be absolutely honest with you. But I agree with you. I think it's disgusting that people have to label everything and everyone now. And it's just, I think it's so insecure and so, I don't even know what to call it. It's just bad. It's just immature, and it's really trying to simplify something to make somebody else feel better about themselves.
Haterade.
And this, that, and the other.
There's a
time will tell if these people should be in those positions or not.
There's
not for us to
misinformation. It's misinformation.
They'll prove whether or not they're worthy.
This is true. I want to talk about goal setting. And did you came out here, you came to Los Angeles when you were about 17. Did you have goals? Did you have like a dream? I'm leaving Philly. I'm going to Los Angeles. What was going on in your mind? Like, I am going to what? What am I going to do in Los Angeles?
Yeah, listen, I knew that I wanted to pursue a career in acting. I was naive. I thought that Sounder, and at that point, Aaron Loves Angela, which I did with my dear friend Irene Cara. I thought that those things gave me a leg up because I didn't have to go out and quote unquote prove myself. I wasn't an unknown. So I thought, hey, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to study with the best, and I'm going to be the best actor that I can be. That was my goal. But that's pretty unrealistic. That's what you think in your mind, but in practicality, there were a lot of good actors in LA. I used to see them all, and we all showed up at the same auditions. It was great, but I think I just wanted the opportunity. I wanted the chance to prove that I could do more, that I could have a career in the industry. I had no other goal other than that, just to be successful, or at least to try to be successful. As I said, the directing thing came later. The producing thing was all born out of that initial sort of ambition, I guess. But no, I didn't really have a tremendous amount of stuff other than that. I didn't know what it was going to take. I just knew I had to be there in order for whatever to happen that was destined to happen. I knew I was going to have to work hard. I knew that nobody was going to give me anything just because, they made that pretty clear for the first year I was here. When I went to auditions and didn't get hired, it became apparent like, oh, okay, I see. I'm starting from scratch here. So,
LA's hard. LA's hard. I think people don't.
Fine. But you know what? if it's too easy, you're not going to work hard.
Yeah.
You'll take it for granted. And I was never afraid of sort of rolling up my sleeves and digging in. And I think maybe that's part of what Bruce saw in me that night when he asked me if I had any interest in doing something else. I don't know. But I knew I had to be in Los Angeles to make that happen.
Mm.
Interestingly enough, it would have been a hell of a lot shorter commute if it was New York. But New York scared me. New York scared me because New York was about theater. And at that time, I needed to take two. I wasn't trying to go, on the boards and go through a whole 2-hour performance. I wasn't ready for that.
What was your first theater piece? Because you have done some really good theater. What was your first theater piece?
I think you came to see me in that.
Yeah, it was great. I thought you did a fantastic job. Yes,
it was called the Hooch.
You did a fantastic job.
I remember that. And we had, you know what? To your credit, we had a really honest conversation about that, if I remember, afterwards. And you asked me some questions about, and I was like, yeah, she does have a point there. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for that. That was good. But yeah, it was at the Henry Street Settlement.
Yes.
Woody King's place. And that was the first one that I did. I only did 2 in my entire life.
Well, I was very proud of you doing that theater piece because theater is live. There are no retakes.
Is no joke. Yeah, there was no like, let me do that one again. Yeah, maybe tomorrow night you can do it again, but not tonight.
Hilarious. I'm a big goal setter. I believe that you got to set goals just to have a map of where you're going. You can always change it. You could always redirect where you want to go. But when I came to Los Angeles, I had my goals. I was like, this is what I want to do with it, and I was pretty good about how am I going to get there. Who do I need to study with? Because we got to study, we got to do this, we got to do that. And as an actor, I think goals keep you honest, because a lot of times you say you want to do something, but you never write it down, you never pursue it. But you're telling everybody, yeah, I want to do this. Well, what are you doing? And for me, it's like, if you say you want to do something, I'm gonna hound you. So are you working on it? What are you doing? Yeah. What did you do today? Right. How are you going to get there? Yeah. And I think that as creatives, we want to do everything, right? We want to do everything, but we can't do everything at the same time. So goals kind of help you start to figure out what the priority is.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that it's important to have goals, and I also think that it's important to have realistic goals. I've met and talked to a lot of actors, particularly actors starting out, and they see themselves in a certain way, and or they see themselves on a track that it's like, okay, well, or they'll use an example of someone that they say, oh, well, I want my career to be like this person or whatever. And it's like, there's so much about the industry that we do not control as the artists. And so your goals have to be goals that are realistic for you, not necessarily what you expect from the industry and how they respond to you. And I've seen that happen before, where people sort of have these goals. And I agree with you, by the way. I'm not saying
no. I think you're bringing up a very good about. Yeah, I think you're bringing up a very excellent point.
Yeah, I just think that because you can get frustrated if your goals are based upon someone else's response to you or someone else's actions. And then those things don't happen, then what do? Then at that point, so I think that you have to sort of make sure that they're focused enough that It's like, okay, these are the things that I want to do for me. Now, if those things translate to success, or they translate to my first series or my first film, or my first theater production or my first directorial effort, whatever that is, you've got to make sure that you're doing the work and that your goals are personal goals that someone can see and respond to. But it can't be, I expect to do this so that those people will do,
Right. Right. Right.
if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And I think that really, again, it comes down to preparedness.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think when you're setting a goal, you have to be very clear on why you want that goal.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Because that's the linchpin. That if your why is not big enough, that goal's not going to happen. I want to be an actor.
Right.
So that goal already, you're in trouble because there are so many different types of acting. I want to be a voiceover actor. Now, and why? Why do I want to be a voiceover actor? Because I love reading copy. If that is so strong for you, then every time you audition reading copy, you are just nailing it. You are just bringing everything you have. If I want to do stand up, why? Why must you do stand up? Because they will eat you if you don't have a big enough why.
That's
why
right.
do you want to make pictures? What is it about? I think in setting the goal, you got to connect with something that you have a passion for. So when the days are not good, when you get 100 rejections, you can get back up the next day and go
at it.
I'm going to go do that. When I started doing stand up, say that again.
No. Go ahead. I was just going to say that real quickly, that we've brought it back full circle to why. The question why.
Absolutely.
And I think that's at the core of any goals, motivations, ambitions that we have, is that you have to answer that question first before you can take any action at all.
It's not the how, and the who comes after the why. The how is not important. How am I going to be an actor? Don't worry about that right now. Why do you want it? Because in any art, any artistic endeavor, you have to be so dedicated. You got to be so dedicated because people are gonna they're gonna break your face. They're gonna come. That you can expect. You can expect that you're gonna come in and you think you're all that. I remember being in LA in the very beginning and going to audition, and I went to Tandem to audition for Sanford and Son. And I was so excited. I'm walking in there. I get my sides. I'm ready to go. And the head of casting broke my face so bad that I my ego wouldn't let me slither out of there. I walked out of there, and then as soon as I got out the building, I started crying. I was like, I called my agent.
I had those. Don't feel alone. I had those days.
But you had to get back up the next day and say, okay, I don't care what that person said. And then what was so funny, I'll never forget it, because it was the first time I called the agent, and I was in a phone booth, hysterical, crying.
Oh, no.
And she said, well, she just called here and thought you were wonderful. What?
See?
What?
See? Yeah,
but in the audition, this woman just gave me hell. She made me, I remember she made me do line by line by line. And then she made me punch up every word. I didn't even know how to punch up. I was like, but as an actor, as a writer, as a director, as a cinematographer, whatever it is that you do, you have to, you mentioned this early on, you have to be confident. Even if you only know two things, hold that. I may not know that, but I know how to do this, and just go in.
I think that's key because, like I said, confidence really informs how you will do not only in the audition, but how you will do during the process. What are you going to be like when you get on set? And as I said earlier, and you had 150 crew members watching you do your thing, and it's like 5 minutes until we have to break for lunch, and we finally get to your close up. I need that close up. I need that performance in 5 minutes. Otherwise, it's going to cost me thousands of dollars to go into another half hour of overtime. So how are you, if you don't have the confidence, I don't know that I can trust you in that 5 minutes. So I think it's critical, but as you said, it really starts with, why am I pursuing this? And I think it's also critically important in this age of immediate satisfaction. When I was coming up, things took time. We understood that things were a process and that there were steps to that, no matter what it was,
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
Still a process. It still
sure.
takes steps.
It is, but the problem is that now, with all the devices where we can get things to happen like that, there's a psyche that basically says it's sped up the process, or the perception of the process we think is going to be faster. Oh, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and then boom, I'll be there where I need to be. And it's like, well, no. Again, you can't control that part of it. You can only control what you do.
And enjoying the process is the most important thing that an artist can hold on to. It's enjoying that process. Is saying,
well, it's also, Lydia, it's also the learning. That's where the learning happens, right? So, the last thing that you want to do is to go into a situation unprepared. So it's the process that prepares you. Talk to anybody who has had any measure of success, and they will tell you, if I didn't get my face broken in that audition that one time, I don't know that I would have approached it the way that I did. I learned from that. I changed what I was doing, and I started applying myself more to this thing, whatever it may be. I also had my face broken too. And I'll never forget it. It was the one time that I went in to read for Mr. Poitier. And I went in and I was super prepared. I had a speech that was about a page of just this character talking. I'd studied it, gone through it, the whole bit. And I got in the room, and you know how there's usually more than one person. You have the director, and you got the casting person, the casting assistant, the writer, 19 producers, and, the whole thing. And I walked in, and it was just Mr. Poitier. Just he and I. And I never recovered. So he gave me some notes, and he says, okay, let's try it. And, he was very relaxed and cool, and I was a nervous wreck. And I never got through the speech. I wound up having to bow out and say, you know what, I'm sorry, today's not my day. I'm truly sorry. I understand, you've given up your time to see me. And I left there and got in my car, and I could not drive home. I was devastated, absolutely devastated. Now, he didn't break my face, but that was me. I knew I had to do better. As hard as I had worked on that, wasn't good enough.
In your estimation, it wasn't good enough. Is that
right?
In your estimation,
because I didn't get the job, so clearly it wasn't good enough.
No, but you already had you had already set it up where, oh my God, I'm in front of this man. Nothing I do will be. You didn't give yourself the opportunity.
I lacked self-confidence that day. And I never reclaimed it. I lost it on the way over. I lost it when I walked into his office and saw that it was just he and I. I
Mm,
didn't have anybody to buffer that energy, that nervous energy off
mm,
of. It was all just he
mm.
and I just couldn't handle it. I just, so one of the days where I broke my own face, but
Yeah, no, but
I
this is
learned from it.
wonderful to hear because actors don't think that happens to other actors. It's just,
Yes,
I'm the one that goes through this bad thing. Everybody else,
right.
or I'm the one that got fired. Nobody, no other actor. Like I remember getting fired off of a sitcom, and first time I ever got fired, I was devastated. I
Right.
had auditioned this wonderful scene. It was so well written, and then I get on set and I have two lines, and they made no sense at all. And
Oh no.
I kept trying, like I was spinning, like, okay, how do I make this work? How do I make that? But they were non sequiturs. They just made no
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And instead of me just saying the line, I didn't know that it was just, you're just throwing out that line. It's not a big deal.
Right. Right.
You
Right.
move on, and I remember, and I remember sitting there going, I am going to get fired. I am going to get fired because
You put it out in the
I
universe. Yeah.
cannot say this line. And sure enough, I get a call from my agent, said, "Don't go back, don't go back." And I was there like
So
4 days.
so we
That's
learn
how we
we
learn.
learn not to put that out
That's
in the
right.
universe,
That's right. And
right?
that's important too,
Um,
is
but let
what
me
you
ask you a
speak.
question. So you have that experience, and I'm sure. I mean, what did you learn from that? What did you take away from that? Did you sort of feel like, okay, I need to understand why this happened, or did you just sort of let it go?
No, I sat with it after I stopped beating myself up,
Right.
because in my mind it's like, you're an actor, you should be able to deliver
Right.
anything they give you.
Right.
If it's two lines, even if they don't make sense, you should be able to make sense out of them. And when I looked at it again, I was able to look and go, okay, you were not able to pivot quickly enough.
Right.
You
Right.
got an audition, and you held on to what you auditioned. That
Right.
wasn't the job. That
Right.
was a beautiful piece of material, but that wasn't the script. You got to come in and do the work. When you got hired, they
Right.
gave you two lines. When you
Yeah.
auditioned, you had this beautiful piece of work, but you got hired to do two lines. Make it work and enjoy it.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. And if you don't, ask the director. I did not, I was so afraid to ask the director, how do I do this? Because I felt like, well, you're a professional. You're not supposed to ask that kind of question. You should know what that is. You should come. And I was so one thing I will say was, I was so proud of the fact that anytime I got hired, I nailed it in the first take. I never,
Right.
if
Right.
you were doing a second take, it had nothing to do with me, because I gave you the
Right.
goods, and I could continue to give you the goods every time you roll. But for me, my pride was in the fact that I came prepared, and I can give you exactly what you
Right.
wanted the
Yeah.
first take. And then,
Yeah.
and then
Or you could pivot and make that, and I bet from that moment on, you were like, okay, you know what? I need to be able to pivot and hear that input from
adapting.
them.
You use that word before, adapting. That when you get on
Yeah.
set, you have to adapt, and you have to know it's not
Absolutely.
about you as an actor. That it is not about you. It's about that show. It's
Yeah.
about their stars. You are a guest. They don't give a shit about you. You got to come in and just do your thing and keep it going. And I will say that MTM uh, damaged us a little bit, because they made us feel we were so important to the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah.
And
Well.
when you left that bubble, you found
Yeah.
out they didn't care. Whereas at MTM, they're like, okay, take your time.
Yeah.
We're gonna do it again. Don't worry.
No.
They just
There was care, but they were also making some of the best product out there. And so that's probably where that care came in. You know what I'm saying? Um, but no, I think you're absolutely right. The process is the thing, and you have to really be a participant and push yourself to participate in ways that are not always easy. And you have to have a certain amount of humility in it, because there are going to be times where your confidence is shaken. But the important thing is that, a lot of times, this, we would wind up going to auditions right from the last, you'd have 2 or 3 auditions in a day. And it's like, well, okay, well, if one devastates you, you still got to get in your car and go to the other one. So in that short amount of time, you got to shake that off.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Wow, that's I think that the legacy that I am most interested in has absolutely nothing to do with films or TV or being a creative person or anything, and it has much more to do with having been a good father, a good parent, to be there for my kids, to have been a good person, a dependable person, someone that treated people with respect, and someone that treated people as equals, and took as much from them as I hope that I gave back. That to be a good husband, those are the things that mean more to me than anything else. And so that is what I would hope that I would leave and that people would talk about. And then after I did some decent things with regard to films and television, and that kind of thing. But that's what's important. Just being a good person.
And that you are. So you already made
Thank
it.
you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
I learned so much from Kevin from this interview. Even though he's a friend, I still learned a lot. Give me a thumbs up and let me know what you thought about this interview in the comments. And while you're at it, buy me a coffee, please. Don't go anywhere. We have another great video coming up. This one is with the iconic New York Times photographer, Mr. Chester Higgins.